What I'm about to share is born from a place of deep sorrow and bewilderment, a question that haunts every heart touched by loss. Why do some people die young? This question has echoed in my mind relentlessly ever since I faced the heartbreaking death of someone so full of life taken far too soon. The pain of losing a young loved one is a wound that cuts deeper than words can express, and it stirred within me an urgent need to understand what seems so unfair, so unjust. A few weeks ago, I lost a dear friend's child, a vibrant soul who had barely begun to write their story here on Earth. Sitting in the quiet of the hospital room after the final breath was drawn, I was overwhelmed by a tidal wave of emotions: confusion, anger, sorrow, and a desperate search for meaning. How could a life so young, so promising, be extinguished so abruptly? How could this be part of a larger plan? These questions swirled in my mind, refusing to relent. It was in those moments, filled with silence and grief, that I realized I had no answers. The usual comforts of faith felt distant, almost fragile beneath the weight of such loss. I found myself wrestling not only with the pain but with the silence that followed, the silence where the question, why, echoed louder than any prayer or scripture I had ever heard. Why does God allow young lives to be cut short? Why does He seem so distant when we need Him most? This question is not new, of course. Throughout history, countless souls have grappled with the same, but it's different when the loss is so personal, so immediate. The ache is sharper, the confusion more profound. I saw it not only in my own heart, but in the faces of others who had suffered similar losses. The parents, siblings, friends, all struggling to make sense of a tragedy that felt senseless. I remember walking through the empty halls of the hospital, my steps echoing the restless thoughts in my mind. I passed rooms where other families sat, holding on to hope or mourning quietly. Each person carried their own story of loss, their own unanswered questions. It was like a tapestry of grief woven through the corridors, each thread a life interrupted, a dream unfulfilled. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with the pain and the questions. The faces of those lost young flickered in my mind like fragile flames, each one a reminder of how fleeting and fragile life is. I felt an overwhelming sense of helplessness. How could I reconcile the love I believed in with the reality of such early death? The more I pondered, the more I realized this was not just a theological puzzle, it was a deeply personal crisis of faith. My heart was torn between trusting in a loving God and the undeniable pain of loss that seemed to contradict that love. It was a tension that threatened to unravel everything I thought I knew about life, death, and divine purpose. In the days that followed, I found myself drawn into conversations with others who had experienced similar grief. We shared stories and tears, but underneath the shared sorrow was a common thread: the desperate search for meaning in the face of loss. We clung to memories, to moments of joy and love, but the question remained, why did their light have to be extinguished so soon? I began to see that this question was not just about the person who died, but about all of us, about how we live, how we understand suffering, and how we find hope when everything seems lost. It dawned on me that our struggle with this question is part of a larger human story, one that touches every life in some way. And so, with a heart heavy yet yearning, I found myself standing at a crossroads. On one side lay despair, with its cold grip threatening to swallow all hope. On the other was a fragile hope, the kind that demands courage to hold on to when everything inside wants to give up. It was here, in this fragile place, that I began a journey not just to find answers, but to seek understanding, to find a way to live with the questions that have no easy answers. I remember one evening, sitting by a window as dusk turned to night, the sky darkening with the stars beginning to emerge. I whispered into the quiet room, "God, if you are there, if you truly love us, why do you take the young? Why must they suffer this fate?" My voice was barely audible, but the weight behind the words was immense. I was not just asking for answers, I was pleading for comfort, for a glimpse of hope in the darkness. In the silence that followed, I felt the stirrings of something profound, a presence, a quiet reassurance that this question, painful as it is not ignored by God. But it was clear that the answers would not come easily, nor in the way I expected. This was the beginning of a different kind of journey, one that would challenge everything I thought I knew about loss, love, and God's purpose. As the days passed, I found myself reflecting more deeply on the nature of life and death. I thought about the moments of joy and pain, the fleeting nature of time, and the mysterious ways in which love weaves through our lives. I began to realize that the pain of losing someone young is not just a story of endings, but also a call to understand a greater story, one that stretches beyond our limited view of time and space. I saw that the question, why do some people die young, is not just a question of justice, but a doorway to something deeper. It challenges us to look beyond the surface of our grief and to seek a perspective that holds both sorrow and hope, loss and meaning. It is a question that demands we hold space for both the darkness of pain and the light of faith. In the weeks that followed, I found moments of peace amid the storm, not because the questions disappeared, but because I began to trust that there is a purpose even in the pain. This trust did not come from easy answers, but from a willingness to sit with the mystery and to believe that God's love is greater than our understanding. And so, I share this with you, not because I have solved the mystery, but because I stand with you in the questions. I share it because the pain of losing young lives is real and raw, and it calls us to a deeper faith, one that can hold the tension between grief and hope. This is not a story with a neat ending, but it is the beginning of a journey that invites us to wrestle with the hardest questions and to find, in the midst of sorrow, a hope that does not disappoint. I don't have the answers yet, but I am learning that the question itself is sacred. It reminds us that life is fragile, that love is precious, and that even in the deepest valleys of loss, we are never alone. The journey ahead will not be easy, but it holds the promise of a revelation that will change how we see young death, not as a tragic interruption, but as part of a divine story that we are only beginning to understand. The weight of grief settled heavily on my chest, pressing down with a force that seemed unyielding. As days turned into nights, and nights blurred into restless mornings, I found myself caught in a tempest of emotions, each one more intense than the last. The loss of a young life, so abrupt and so final, clawed at my faith, shaking the very foundation of what I thought I believed. It was no longer a distant theological question, but a raw, personal agony that demanded answers I could barely grasp. I was not alone in this turmoil. Around me, I saw others drowning in the same sea of confusion and pain. Friends who had lost children, siblings who mourned brothers and sisters taken too soon, parents whose hearts were shattered by the silence left behind. Their grief echoed my own, a haunting chorus that refused to be silenced. We were bound together not just by sorrow, but by the desperate need to find meaning in a reality that felt cruel and senseless. One afternoon, I found myself in a small gathering with a group of grieving parents. The room was thick with silence, broken only by the occasional sob or whispered memory. Each story was a testament to love lost too soon, dreams unfulfilled, and futures stolen. Yet, amid the tears, there was also a fierce determination not to be defeated by despair, but to seek understanding and hope where it seemed impossible. I listened as one mother spoke of her son, a bright light snuffed out by illness before he could even graduate high school. Another shared how her daughter's laughter still lingered in the house, a ghostly reminder of a life interrupted. Their words resonated deeply within me, each tale a mirror reflecting my own struggle. It became clear that the pain of losing young lives was not isolated. It was a shared human experience that transcended age, culture, and circumstance. This collective sorrow intensified my own inner battle. How could I reconcile the love I believed in with the harsh reality unfolding before me? The faith that once brought comfort now felt fragile, almost brittle, as if it might shatter under the strain of unanswered questions. I found myself oscillating between moments of hope and waves of despair, caught in a relentless cycle that left me exhausted and empty. In those darkest moments, I questioned everything. Was God truly present in our suffering? Did he hear the cries of those left behind, or had he turned away, indifferent to the pain that racked our souls? These questions were not just academic, they were the raw, desperate cries of a heart searching for meaning amid chaos. I remember one particular evening sitting alone in my room, the walls closing in as the silence pressed down around me. I reached out in prayer, my voice trembling with anguish. Why, God? Why must they be taken so soon? Why does the light fade before its time? The questions poured out, unfiltered and raw, a torrent of grief that refused to be contained. Yet, in the midst of this turmoil, I sensed something subtle, a quiet stirring beneath the storm. It was as if the very act of asking these painful questions was itself a form of reaching out, a tentative step towards something beyond the pain. Though the answers remained elusive, the search for understanding became a lifeline, pulling me through the darkness, one fragile thread at a time. As I continued to wrestle with these emotions, I noticed how the pain of early death seemed to create a rift between the reality of loss and the hope offered by faith. It was as if two worlds collided, the rawness of human sorrow on one side and the promises of divine love on the other. Bridging this chasm felt impossible, yet I knew that healing depended on finding a way to hold both truths together. This internal conflict was mirrored in the stories I heard from others. Some clung fiercely to the hope of reunion in eternity, finding solace in the belief that death was not the end. Others struggled to reconcile that hope with the unbearable reality of absence, feeling abandoned and lost. The tension between faith and grief was palpable, a divide that seemed impossible to mend. In the midst of this struggle, I realized that the question, why do some people die young, was not just a theological puzzle but a deeply human cry, a plea for justice, for fairness, for meaning in suffering. It was a question that demanded more than platitudes or easy answers. It required honest confrontation with the pain and the mystery. This realization deepened my desire to seek answers not just for myself but for the countless others whose hearts were shattered by early loss. I wanted to understand how faith could withstand such profound grief, how hope could emerge from despair, and how meaning could be found in a narrative that often seemed broken. Yet, the more I sought, the more I encountered silence. Traditional explanations felt inadequate, offering little comfort in the face of raw, aching loss. The idea that life's value is measured by length felt hollow when the shortest lives often left the deepest scars. The comforting words about God's plan felt distant when the wound was so fresh and so deep. This silence forced me to confront the limits of human understanding. It was a humbling experience, recognizing that some questions might remain unanswered in this life, that some mysteries might resist explanation. But it also sparked a yearning to move beyond despair, to find a way to live with the questions without losing hope. In those moments, I began to glimpse a different kind of faith, one that does not demand neat answers but embraces the complexity of human experience, a faith that holds space for grief and anger, for doubt and trust, for sorrow and hope. It was not a faith of certainty but of perseverance, a courage to walk through the valley of loss while still reaching toward light. This shift was not instantaneous but gradual, a slow unfolding that required patience and grace. It meant allowing myself to feel the full weight of loss without turning away, to confront the darkness without being consumed by it. It meant recognizing that faith is not the absence of questions but the willingness to live with them. Throughout this journey, I found myself drawn again and again to the stories of others who had walked similar paths, those who had faced early death with courage and faith, whose lives and losses had touched the lives of many. Their stories became beacons, reminding me that even in the face of tragedy, life's meaning endures. One story in particular stayed with me, a young woman who lost her brother suddenly and inexplicably. In her grief, she wrestled with anger and doubt, yet she also discovered a deep well of compassion and strength. She spoke of how her brother's life, though brief, had sparked a ripple of love and kindness that continued to grow. Her story challenged me to see that early death, while devastating, could also be woven into a larger tapestry of purpose and love. As I reflected on these realities, the question that once felt like a crushing weight began to take on a new shape. It was no longer a demand for simple answers, but an invitation to explore the depths of faith and human experience. It was a call to hold together the pain of loss and the hope of meaning, to lean into the mystery rather than shy away from it. This journey has been a crucible, a place where faith is tested and refined. It has forced me to confront the rawest edges of sorrow and to seek a faith that is robust enough to hold the hardest questions. Though I still wrestle with the pain and the silence, I have come to understand that this struggle itself is part of the path toward healing and hope. And so, I continue to walk this road not because I have found all the answers, but because I refuse to be defeated by despair. I carry the stories of those lost young lives in my heart, their memories a sacred trust that calls me forward. I hold on to the fragile hope that beyond the questions and the pain, there is a greater story unfolding, a story of love, purpose, and ultimate restoration that we are only beginning to glimpse. This is the reality of the struggle, a journey through grief that is both deeply personal and profoundly shared. It is a journey that challenges us to face the hardest truths with honesty and courage, to seek understanding without losing faith, and to find in the midst of loss a hope that sustains even when the answers remain hidden. The nights grew longer, and my heart heavier, as the questions pressed in relentlessly. I found myself retreating into moments of solitude, desperate for clarity, for a sign, for anything that could pierce the veil of uncertainty hanging over my soul. In the quiet hours, when the world was still and the weight of grief most acute, I would fall to my knees, praying not for easy answers but for understanding, some glimpse of light amid the darkness. One evening, as the sky deepened into a velvet black, I sat by the window, the faint glow of streetlights casting long shadows across the room. My breath came in shallow gasps, the ache inside me raw and unyielding. I whispered into the silence, "God, if you are there, if you hear me, please show me why this happens. Help me understand why young lives are taken so soon." The words felt fragile, almost a plea from a child, but they carried the weight of a soul desperate for truth. In the stillness that followed, I felt a presence, not a thunderous revelation, but a quiet assurance, like a soft whisper in the depths of my heart. It was as if God was near, waiting patiently for me to ask, to seek, to open myself to whatever truth might come. That moment marked the beginning of a new chapter in my journey, a turning point where my search for meaning became not just a question but a quest. The days that followed were filled with a deep longing to understand, to reconcile the pain with the faith I still clung to. I began to read, to listen, to immerse myself in stories and teachings that wrestled with the mystery of premature death. I sought out those who had walked similar paths, hoping their insights might illuminate the shadows that clouded my mind. One afternoon, I found myself in a quiet garden, surrounded by blooming flowers and the gentle hum of life continuing despite sorrow. I sat on a bench, journal in hand, pouring out the torrent of questions swirling inside me. As I wrote, a sense of calm began to settle, a small but growing conviction that this journey was not about finding simple answers, but about embracing a deeper truth. It was then that I sensed God beginning to speak, not in words I heard with my ears, but in impressions and images that stirred my spirit. I saw glimpses of a divine purpose beyond human understanding, where every life, no matter how brief, held meaning that stretched far beyond the limits of time. I began to realize that the pain of losing young lives was part of a greater story, one woven with threads of love, sacrifice, and hope that we cannot yet fully see. This realization did not erase the sorrow or the questions, but it transformed them. The search for meaning became less about demanding explanations and more about opening my heart to the mystery of God's plan. It was a surrender not to despair, but to a faith that trusts even when the path is unclear. One night, as I lay awake wrestling with these thoughts, a vision came to me vivid and compelling. I saw a tapestry, vast and intricate, stretching beyond the horizon. Each thread represented a life, woven together in a pattern too complex for human eyes to grasp. Some threads were bright and long, others short and shimmering, but all were essential to the beauty and purpose of the whole. In this vision, I understood that the lives taken young were not lost or wasted, but were vital parts of the divine design. Their brief presence sparked changes, ripples of love and influence that reached far beyond what we can see. It was a revelation that challenged my previous understanding, inviting me to trust that God's wisdom surpasses our limited perspective. This encounter stirred a new courage within me, a willingness to live with the tension between loss and hope, between grief and trust. I realized that faith is not about having all the answers, but about walking forward with open hands and a hopeful heart, even when the way is shrouded in mystery. As days turned into weeks, I continued to seek God's presence through prayer and reflection. I found that the act of asking these difficult questions was itself a form of connection, a dialogue where God met me in my pain and invited me to deeper understanding. It was a sacred exchange, where my doubts and fears were met with compassion and love rather than condemnation or silence. Through this process, I began to see that the question, "Why do some people die young?" is not a question God avoids, but one He invites us to bring before Him. It is an invitation to engage with the heart of divine love, a love that grieves with us, that understands our pain, and that holds the promise of redemption, even in the darkest moments. This journey also revealed to me the importance of community. I sought out others who were willing to walk alongside me in this quest, people who could listen without judgment and share their own stories of struggle and hope. Together, we formed a fragile but vital fellowship, a space where questions were welcomed and faith was nurtured amidst the uncertainties. One particular conversation stayed with me. A friend who had lost a sibling in their youth spoke of how her grief had transformed into a profound sense of purpose. She described how the pain had opened her heart to deeper compassion and had drawn her closer to God in ways she had never imagined. Her story was a beacon, reminding me that even in loss, life's meaning can be rekindled and faith renewed. I also began to notice moments of grace in the everyday, in the kindness of strangers, the laughter of children, the beauty of a sunset. These glimpses of light amidst the shadows became reminders that life, however fragile, is precious and filled with divine presence. They encouraged me to hold on to hope even when the questions remained unanswered. Throughout this season, I wrestled with the paradox of faith and suffering, coming to understand that they are not opposites but intertwined. To have faith is not to deny pain, but to embrace it as part of the human journey, trusting that God is present even when we cannot see or understand His ways. This realization brought a quiet peace, a reassurance that my search for meaning was not in vain, that God was walking with me through the valley of grief. It was a peace that did not erase the sorrow, but gave me strength to face it, to live with the uncertainty, and to hope beyond the pain. As I continue on this path, I am learning that the quest for understanding is ongoing. There are no easy answers or quick fixes, only the slow unfolding of grace and truth. It is a journey marked by questions and doubts, by tears and moments of joy, by the tension between what is lost and what is yet to be revealed. In the midst of this journey, I hold on to the promise that God is not distant or indifferent, but intimately involved in every detail of our lives. His love is a steady anchor in the storm, a light that shines in the darkness. And though the question, why do some people die young, may never be fully answered in this life, I trust that one day, in time and eternity, the fullness of His plan will be revealed. For now, I continue to seek, to ask, and to wait, knowing that in the waiting, faith grows and hope endures. This is the sacred invitation before us all, to bring our questions to God, to sit with our pain, and to trust that He will meet us there with love beyond measure. What I am about to share feels like a hard truth, one that unsettles the heart and challenges the soul, but it is a truth I came to understand through my journey of grief and searching. In the midst of wrestling with the question of why some people die young, I encountered a revelation from God, one that reshaped everything I thought I knew about life, death, and purpose. It began in a moment of prayer, when the weight of sorrow was almost unbearable, and I cried out for understanding. In that fragile space between despair and hope, God's voice came not as a thunderous command, but as a gentle, devastating truth. He revealed that some souls are called home early because their mission on earth is complete, even if it feels incomplete to those left behind. This was not the kind of answer I expected. It did not soothe the pain with sweet comforts or easy explanations. Instead, it confronted me with the reality that life's purpose is not measured by the number of years we live, but by the depth of the impact and the fulfillment of the mission entrusted to each soul. Some lives, though brief, are fully lived in the sense that they accomplish what God intended. God explained that early death can serve a greater good, a divine purpose woven into the fabric of eternity. Sometimes, a life taken young becomes a catalyst, sparking transformations in others, awakening faith, or preventing greater suffering yet unseen. This perspective did not diminish the pain of loss. Rather, it reframed it within the vastness of God's wisdom and love. I struggled to grasp this at first. How could a life cut short be complete? How could suffering and loss be part of a divine plan? But the more I pondered, the more I realized that God's ways transcend human understanding. What seems like an abrupt ending from our limited view may be a beginning of something eternal and profound. This revelation brought a new lens through which to view the lives lost too soon. I began to see that those who die young often leave legacies that ripple through families, communities, and even generations. Their presence, though brief, can ignite hope, inspire change, and deepen faith in ways that long lives sometimes do not. God highlighted that life's value is not in its length, but in the love given, the lives touched, and the purposes fulfilled. This truth challenged the common measure of success and fulfillment. It invited me to trust that every soul's journey is unique and purposeful, crafted with divine intentionality. As this understanding settled in, I found it both devastating and comforting. Devastating because it acknowledged the harsh reality of loss without minimizing the grief. Comforting because it offered a glimpse of hope that the young lives taken were not wasted but were part of a grand, loving design. I remembered the young friend whose death had sparked this journey. Seeing their family's heartbreak, I realized that while their earthly story ended too soon, their spiritual journey had touched countless hearts. Their courage, their laughter, their love had left an indelible mark that continued to inspire and heal. This truth also helped me see that sometimes early death prevents greater suffering or hardship that we cannot comprehend. It is not a punishment or a failure, but a merciful act within a larger, loving plan. God's heart breaks with ours, and His timing, though mysterious, is perfect. The realization shifted my perspective on grief and faith. It invited me to move beyond asking why, in despair, and to begin asking what for. With trust, what purpose might this loss serve? How might God use this pain to bring about healing, transformation, or deeper connection? This shift did not erase the sorrow or the tears. Grief remained real and raw, but it was now held within a framework of hope and divine purpose. It allowed space for mourning while also opening the door to faith that transcends understanding. I began to share this revelation gently with others who mourned young lives. Some found comfort in the idea that their loved ones' lives had meaning beyond their years. Others were challenged to see loss not as meaningless tragedy, but as part of a sacred story that continues beyond death. In communities touched by early death, this perspective began to take root. It fostered conversations that honored the pain without succumbing to despair. It encouraged families to remember the impact of their loved ones and to find ways to carry forward their legacy. Through this journey, I saw how faith can grow stronger amid suffering when anchored in the truth of God's purpose. Trusting that every life matters, that no loss is wasted, and that God's love is greater than our pain brought a new depth to my own faith. I also realized that this truth calls us to live intentionally, valuing each moment and relationship. Knowing that life's worth is measured by love and purpose, not time, challenges us to embrace each day as a gift and to live with meaning and compassion. This divine explanation reshaped how I viewed death and eternity. It assured me that those taken young are not forgotten or lost, but are welcomed into a fullness of life beyond our imagination. Their mission continues in the eternal realm, and their influence remains alive in the hearts of those they touched. The revelation is not a simple answer, but a profound truth that invites us to trust God's wisdom even when it feels painful. It challenges us to hold grief and hope together, to mourn deeply while believing in a purpose greater than our understanding. As I continue to reflect on this revelation, I am reminded that faith is often tested in the crucible of loss. It is in these moments that God's presence becomes most real, not as a distant observer, but as a loving Father who grieves with us and carries us through. This truth has not removed the ache of losing young lives, but it has transformed my relationship with grief. It has given me a framework to hold the pain without despair, to seek meaning without denying sorrow, and to trust God's perfect love even when the reasons remain hidden. In sharing this, I do not pretend to have all the answers, but I offer a hope born from divine encounter, a hope that life's worth is not measured by years but by love and purpose, and that every soul's journey matters deeply to God. This understanding invites us to live with open hearts, to embrace the mystery, and to find peace in the midst of loss. It calls us to honor those taken young by cherishing the love they gave and trusting that their mission continues beyond what we can see. The path through grief is never easy, but with this revelation, it becomes a journey toward faith that holds both sorrow and hope, pain and purpose, loss and eternal love. The revelation I received was like a double-edged sword, both a balm and a burden. In the days and weeks that followed, I found myself wrestling intensely with the weight of this truth. It was as if I had been handed a fragile seed of wisdom that promised life but demanded a new way of seeing, feeling, and living through the pain of loss. The mixture of devastation and peace within me was profound, a tension that I could neither fully escape nor completely embrace. At times, the pain surged anew, sharper than ever, reminding me that no revelation could erase the rawness of grief. I would find myself overwhelmed by memories, by the absence so palpable it felt like a physical ache. Yet, even in these moments, the knowledge that my friend's life had a divine purpose gave me a foothold, a thread of hope to cling to amid the storm. This divine explanation shifted something deep within me. It moved me from a place of despair to one of trust, even if that trust was fragile and often faltering. I began to see grief not only as loss, but also as part of a sacred process, a journey through which God's wisdom and love are revealed in ways that defy our human understanding. I realized that holding this truth meant embracing complexity. It meant allowing myself to feel the full spectrum of emotions, anger, confusion, sorrow, while also opening my heart to the possibility of peace and acceptance. It was a dance between mourning and trusting, between lament and hope. This transformation was not immediate or easy. There were days when the weight of the revelation felt too heavy, when doubts and fears threatened to overwhelm me. But slowly, with prayer and reflection, I found a new rhythm, a way to carry the truth without being crushed by it. One morning, as I sat quietly with a cup of coffee, memories of my young friend flooded back. I thought about their laughter, their dreams, the way their presence had touched so many lives. The pain of their absence was still sharp, but alongside it, I felt a profound gratitude for having known them at all. This gratitude was new, a sign that the revelation was taking root in my soul. I began to speak about this truth with others who were grieving. Sharing it was both a challenge and a gift. I knew the words could sting, they were not easy to hear, but I also saw how they could open doors to healing. In conversations with grieving families and friends, I witnessed how understanding that a life's purpose can be fulfilled, even in its brevity, brought a measure of peace that no platitude could offer. There was a mother who lost her teenage son in a tragic accident. When I gently shared this revelation with her, I saw her face soften, tears mingling with a tentative smile. She spoke of how her son's life, though short, had inspired others to kindness and courage. This acknowledgement of purpose helped her shift from despair to a place where she could begin to hope again. These moments became a sacred exchange, a mutual sharing of pain and hope that knit broken hearts together. The revelation did not erase the grief, but gave it a framework where healing could begin. It invited those who mourn to see their loved ones not as lost or forgotten, but as integral parts of a divine story that continues beyond death. Within my own heart, this truth sparked a deepening of faith. It was a faith that could hold the tension between suffering and trust, between unanswered questions and the assurance of God's love. I learned that faith is not the absence of struggle, but the courage to walk through it with God's hand in ours. This journey also transformed how I viewed life itself. Knowing that purpose and impact matter more than longevity challenged me to live more intentionally. It called me to value each moment, each relationship, and each act of love as part of a greater mission. The awareness that our time is limited became a catalyst not for fear, but for deeper meaning and presence. In my community, I saw this understanding ripple outward. Conversations about grief became more honest and compassionate. Families began to honor the lives of those taken young by celebrating the love and purpose they embodied, rather than simply mourning their absence. This shift fostered resilience, a way to carry grief without being consumed by it. The revelation also brought a new perspective on suffering itself. I began to see suffering not as meaningless pain, but as a place where God's presence is often most profound. It is in the crucible of hardship that faith is refined, compassion is deepened, and love is revealed in its most powerful form. This understanding did not provide all the answers, nor did it erase the ache of loss. Instead, it offered a path forward, a way to live with grief and faith intertwined, each informing and sustaining the other. It invited me to embrace a faith that is real and raw, one that acknowledges pain but refuses to be defined by it. As I continued to walk this path, I found myself drawn deeper into prayer and reflection. I sought to hold the revelation gently, allowing it to shape my heart and mind without forcing it into neat compartments. It became a living truth, unfolding day by day, in moments of sorrow and joy alike. In sharing this journey, I do not claim to have mastered the balance between grief and faith. There are still days of struggle, moments when doubt shadows hope, but the revelation I received has become a foundation, a sacred trust that God's love and purpose are at work even in the hardest losses. This truth calls us to a deeper compassion for ourselves and for others who mourn. It reminds us that grief is a journey, not a destination, and that within the journey, there is space for healing, growth, and hope. It challenges us to hold each other gently, to listen without judgment, and to walk together toward the light. In the face of early death, this revelation offers a way to carry the unbearable, to bear witness to both the pain and the purpose, to mourn and to believe, to grieve and to hope. It is a truth that has transformed my own heart, and I pray can bring comfort and courage to others walking the same difficult road. The journey continues, marked by questions and discoveries, by sorrow and grace. And through it all, I hold fast to the knowledge that life's measure is not in years, but in love fulfilled, purpose achieved, and faith embraced, even when the reasons remain beyond our grasp. The transformation I experienced didn't remain a private journey. It spilled over into conversations, writings, and moments of shared vulnerability with others who carried similar wounds. I began to speak openly about the revelation that some lives, though brief, carry a divine purpose that transcends earthly measures, and I witnessed how this message touched hearts in profound ways. In one small group gathering, a mother who had lost her young daughter shared how hearing this truth shifted her grief. Instead of feeling her daughter's life was cut short and meaningless, she began to see it as a vital thread in a larger tapestry of love and purpose. The relief that washed over her face was unmistakable, a burden lifted, if only slightly, by the hope that her child's life mattered deeply beyond the years lived. As I continued to share these insights, I noticed a change not only in individuals but also within communities. Those who had been hesitant to talk about death or to face grief openly began to embrace conversations that honored both sorrow and faith. Memorial gatherings transformed from somber occasions into celebrations of impact and legacy, where stories of love and purpose were recounted with both tears and smiles. This shift was not about minimizing pain, but about creating space for healing. It allowed families to hold their grief without being overwhelmed, to remember their loved ones with reverence and joy, and to find meaning in the midst of loss. The message that a life's worth is measured by love and purpose, not years, became a beacon for those navigating the complexities of early death. Through these shared experiences, I saw communities begin to heal in ways I had not imagined possible. People who once felt isolated in their sorrow found connection and understanding. The revelation became a bridge linking broken hearts and transforming mourning into a collective journey toward hope. On a personal level, this journey deepened my own faith in ways I never anticipated. The process of sharing and witnessing others' responses expanded my understanding of God's love and grace. I realized that faith grows not only in moments of certainty, but also in vulnerability when we allow ourselves to be seen, to ask hard questions, and to lean into the mystery together. Writing became an important outlet for me. Through journaling and sharing my reflections, I found a voice that could articulate the tension between grief and hope. Readers reached out, expressing how the message resonated with their own experiences, offering comfort in places where words had once failed. These connections reinforced the communal nature of healing and faith. Prayer remained central throughout this transformation. I prayed for those who mourned, for families shattered by early loss, and for a world that often struggles to comprehend such pain. Prayer became an act of solidarity, a way to carry the burdens of others while seeking God's peace and wisdom. One of the most profound lessons I learned was the importance of bearing witness, to listen deeply, to hold space without judgment, and to accompany others on their grief journeys. In doing so, I discovered that healing is often found not in answers, but in presence. Simply being with someone in their sorrow can be a powerful act of love and grace. This journey also called me to be intentional about cultivating hope. I saw that hope is not naive optimism, but a resilient trust in God's goodness amid brokenness. It is a light that shines in the darkest places, inviting us forward when the way seems unclear. As communities embraced this perspective, I noticed a ripple effect. Families began to engage in acts of remembrance that celebrated life and purpose, charitable works inspired by the loved ones lost, gatherings that fostered connection, and stories passed down that kept memories alive. These acts became a way to transform grief into legacy. I also witnessed a shift in how people prepared for death. Conversations about mortality, once taboo, became more open and honest. This openness allowed individuals and families to face the reality of loss with courage and faith, fostering peace rather than fear. Through these experiences, I grew spiritually, learning to live with the paradox of sorrow and joy intertwined. I came to understand that grief is not a sign of weak faith, but an expression of love, a testament to the bonds that death cannot sever. This journey has been marked by moments of breakthrough and moments of struggle. There were times when hope felt distant and despair threatened to take hold. Yet, the community of shared faith and the revelation of divine purpose provided a sustaining foundation. I began to see that transformation is not a destination but a process, a lifelong unfolding of trust, healing, and growth. It requires patience, compassion, and a willingness to walk alongside others with humility and grace. In the midst of this, I have learned to celebrate the small victories, the moments when a tear turns to a smile, when a painful memory becomes a cherished story, when a heart begins to trust again. These moments are signs of life emerging from loss, of hope rekindled in the shadows. This journey has also deepened my commitment to offering compassion to those who suffer, recognizing that every story of loss is unique and sacred. It has taught me to approach grief with reverence and to honor the sacredness of each person's journey. As I continue to reflect and grow, I am reminded that we are called not only to seek understanding, but also to embody hope and healing in the world. The revelation about the purpose behind early death challenges us to live with intentionality, to love deeply, and to carry one another's burdens with grace. Through shared stories, prayer, and community, I have witnessed the transformative power of faith grounded in love and truth. It is a faith that does not erase pain but embraces it, that does not promise easy answers but offers steadfast hope. This ongoing journey invites us all to participate, to listen, to share, to hope, and to trust that even in the hardest losses, God's purpose unfolds in ways beyond our comprehension. It is a call to live fully, love deeply, and walk together toward the light of healing and redemption. As I stand here today, carrying the weight of these revelations and the stories of those who have journeyed through grief alongside me, I find myself drawn to a prayer, a plea for healing, for transformation, for light to break through the darkness that so often accompanies early loss. It is a prayer not only for myself, but for every heart shattered by the sudden painful departure of a young life. God, I whisper into the quiet, heal the broken hearts that ache with unanswered whys. Mend the shattered souls who wonder if their pain is seen or understood. Transform despair into faith and confusion into clarity. Help us to rest in your love even when our questions linger. This prayer is born from the rawest places within me, a cry that echoes the silent sorrows of countless others. It is a prayer for courage to face the mystery without surrendering to despair, to hold on to hope even when it feels faint, to find peace amid the storm. I want to invite you, whoever you are reading this, to join me in this prayer. If you have lost a young loved one, if your heart is heavy with grief and questions, if you wrestle with the pain of early death, know that you are not alone. Together, let us bring our sorrows before God, asking for His comfort, His presence, and His healing. The journey through grief is not one we are meant to walk alone. It calls for community, compassion, and shared vulnerability. It requires us to support one another with patience and grace, to listen without judgment, and to offer hope when despair threatens to overwhelm. I urge you not to shy away from the difficult conversations. Speak openly about loss. Share your stories. Allow space for tears and laughter, for memories and dreams. In doing so, you honor the lives taken too soon and create a legacy of love and resilience. This is a call to shift from asking why, in a way that traps us in despair, to asking what for, a question that opens doors to understanding and purpose. It is an invitation to trust that even the darkest valleys are part of a journey toward a greater light, a divine plan unfolding in ways we cannot yet see. Embracing this truth transforms how we live each day. It challenges us to cherish every moment, to love fiercely, and to walk with intention. It reminds us that our time here is precious, and that the impact of a life is measured not by its length, but by the love and purpose it carries. As we navigate the mysteries of life and death, let us hold fast to the knowledge that God's love is relentless and His plans are perfect even when they confound us. Let us trust that every soul matters deeply to Him, that no loss is wasted, and that eternal joy awaits those who have been called home too soon. The path is not easy, and the questions may never fully cease. But in embracing the journey with faith, courage, and community, we move closer to healing and hope. We learn to carry our grief with grace, to find meaning in the midst of pain, and to live in the light of God's unfailing love. I pray that this understanding will inspire you to face your own losses with new strength, to support those around you with compassion, and to trust that together we can transform mourning into celebration. May we become bearers of hope in a world that so desperately needs it. Let us walk this road hand in hand, hearts open, eyes lifted toward the promise of restoration. May the love that transcends death fill us with peace, and may the mysteries that challenge us become the foundations of a faith that never falters. This is the journey I invite you to join, a journey from sorrow to hope, from questions to trust, from loss to eternal life.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending this time with us today. I truly hope that this message has strengthened your faith, brought peace to your heart, and reminded you of the endless love of Jesus Christ. Whatever you may be facing right now, please remember that you are never alone. Jesus is walking beside you through every joy, every struggle, and every uncertain moment. His grace is greater than your fears. His love is stronger than your pain, and His light can guide you through even the darkest times. Keep praying, keep trusting, and place your worries in His hands. Jesus knows your heart, hears every prayer, and will give you the strength you need to keep moving forward. If this message blessed you, please share it with someone who may need hope today, and subscribe to join our community. May Jesus bless you, protect your family, and fill your life with faith, love, and peace. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. God bless you.
Together, may we find the courage to embrace the unknown and the grace to live fully in the light of God's everlasting love.